Hi, this is Bruno Guerra talking to you from the SAP offices in Waldorf. Today is September 3rd, and I have with me
Daniel Maffei
and
Michael Krügel.
So Daniel and Michael are actually design thinking experts here at SAP, and I got several requests from people that I know outside of and inside of the SAP community telling me and asking me what design thinking is, and I thought, why not asking the experts? Daniel, maybe before we start talking about design thinking, you just tell something about yourself, what your role is here, what kind of expertise you have.
Okay, yeah, I'm a product designer, I'm basically my education is design as a topic, and I've been working on visual design, user experience design, and now I call it product design, what I do.
Michael?
I'm an engineer or a computer scientist by trade. I've worked in multiple roles within SAP, so with the ecosystem, working with partners and customers, educating them about new technologies. And in the beginning I've been a project lead in the development organization, and now for 1.5 years I've been working with the product design group as part of this interdisciplinary team where we have designers, engineers and product managers working together to get really a holistic picture on products.
So, meaning that you guys, a techie and a non-techie, are working together on design thinking. So maybe before we look into questions like, okay, what is SAP doing with design thinking and why, and examples, maybe you explain people how design thinking works. Is it a process? Is it a theoretical thing that doesn't really work? So what is design thinking?
Well, our definition of design thinking basically is that design thinking is a methodology of creative finding and solving of problems. So really important for us is the aspect that you first have to find the right problem to solve before you solve it the right way.
Oh, that's a very difficult task for a techie. Okay, but how do you do that? So how are these the steps?
Yeah, in theory, you could say that there are 5 steps to design thinking. Basically, you first have to empathize with your end users. So you try to find out whom you are working for in the end. From the knowledge that you gain from empathizing with those people and their work and life situation, you define something we call a point of view. So basically you define what you think is the right problem you should be solving, and then you start, based on the research you did before, with ideation. So you start generating ideas of how to solve that problem, still without too much focus on technology, really what would be the right solution to that problem. Maybe you go on with the next step.
Yeah, if you then have to find what that solution is, you start prototyping, so you do very rough prototypes.
But not coding prototypes, right?
No, not coding. Prototype can be everything from kind of a role play to mock-ups that you just use pencil and paper for, or even different Lego scenes where you just can explain what your solution would look like. And then you go basically out with that prototype and test it with your customers, or basically test it with other teams within the company just to get early feedback, and then you kind of iterate and refine that and go out to customers, learn more, and with that you iteratively come to the final solution.
So you just said before that you need to empathize with your end user. What do you mean with that? So do I need to sit there and ask the person questions, how their life is, how they feel, or how do you, what do you mean with empathizing?
Basically, you want to find out as much as possible about the people you are building your software or your product for. This could, of course, include interviews, asking them what their problems are, asking them what they would like to see as a solution. But another really important aspect of it is that you go out and observe their work situation or the situation you want to build a product for, because an important thing is that people have a hard time telling you what they want. Sometimes they even don't know that they have a problem, but if you watch them do their stuff, if you see what workarounds they build themselves, what little helpers, what post-its they put up to their computer screen, you gain a lot of insight into what their work situation is and how you might tackle that problem.
So, but let's assume I have now an end user with a specific role. I assume you will do research with or interviews with many of these people, right? So you would get a lot of information that you collect with those. What do you do with this huge set of information, like interviews? You just said maybe pictures of their working place with post-its on their monitor. What do you do with that?
Yeah, you basically put together all that information you have in a process we call synthesis, and what you do is you try to build a so-called persona, which is an archetypical representation of this kind of user. It doesn't really always have to be a specific role. It could also be a certain situation of user. So let's say university graduates or people just a short time before their retirement or something. So you build this persona that is the representation of a certain group of users, and you try to be very specific with that persona, give the persona a name, give certain attributes to the persona, and later on you can use this persona to basically take their point of view and look at the product you're building. Does it solve the problem of that persona or not?
So that during the process you can always go back and say, what would John Doe, your persona, do in this case?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so after you are having now defined this persona and the persona's point of view, what comes next? So what is the outcome that you can use then for the next process step?
So with that persona and point of view, it kind of crisply defines the problem that you want to address for this persona. Mm-hmm. So usually we come up with a how might we question, so how might we help this person to solve, and then the problem we identified really in detail. You go into ideation mode, so basically switch on your solution engine and come up with ideas on how to solve that problem.
And again, no ideas on how to code certain stuff, right?
Right, yeah, this is basically general, how might we solve that problem. That can be a system, but in other instances it can be a process change or a new physical product or change in workplace or whatever. And with those solutions then you come up with lots of them, you come up with wild ideas, you try to draw also analogies, how is that solved in a different industry, for example. Mm-hmm. Have they similar projects that you can learn from? And all of that you get together, and then you come up with tons of ideas, and then you cluster them in similar stuff, and you usually do voting, so you basically pick up the top 3 or 5 most interesting solutions that resonate with the team, and then you go into prototyping and very roughly sketch out how that solution would look like and would affect the life of that person or that persona and solve the problem. And with that you can then go out and kind of test and get feedback if that really would work.
So in the way you're currently explaining, it's about first getting very broad, right, on these process steps, and then to narrow down again things like, for example, the persona is a narrowed down instance of your research work that you did, right, and also The same also for the point of view. And then also when you go wild with ideas, and then you try to narrow down again to a specific solution, or 3 or 4 or 5 different things. Meaning again to become, from a very broad perspective, again very specific on how to solve the issue specifically. Can someone say that?
Right. And with this big number of ideas, you usually have, and as one of the principles, you try to build on the ideas of others. So basically, you see 2 or 3 ideas that could be combined and add something else, and then you suddenly have this great breakthrough idea. And if you restrict yourself in the beginning with only small number of ideas, or have too many restrictions in the back of your mind, you will usually not get there. So it's very important kind of to free yourself of limitations and only bring them in once you kind of funnel them back to the solution that you want to build.
So, meaning at the end of this of a design thinking workshop, exercise, name it, you always have 1, 2, 3 and prototypes, meaning things that you have written down, mock-ups you draw, or maybe a storyboard showing how the user would go through solving the issue. You go back again to the user to verify in this testing phase. It doesn't sound like it's a very linear process, right?
No, it's really a lot of iterations. So it really happens that you come up with those ideas and you build a very rough prototype in a day or 2, and then you go out to customers and the thing just doesn't fly, so you don't get any good feedback, and then you just go back and look at the rest of your ideas, or basically, usually with going out with the prototype, you again learn from the feedback, and then you just go back and iterate that on.
So we heard now that you said the theory, right, about design thinking. What is now, from your point of view, the real sweet spot from this design thinking methodology? So how would you say does this methodology help a company with their products, and how does it also help the roles involved in this product development?
I guess the benefit is twofold. One, the whole process, or as we described it, and however you implement it, is aimed at finding the right problem to solve. So to make sure that the product you will build in the end actually is able to earn you money, because there is a need out there. You don't just anticipate there might be a need, but you really, through prototyping, through feedback,
you want to ensure that it's desirable.
Yeah, exactly. You really have to figure out, and you want to figure out, is that something that solves an actual problem, and so people are prepared to give you money for that. The second thing about this approach we described is that it does a lot to improve motivation of the teams that are working on the projects, because you really start by learning about the people you are working for. You empathize, and the whole team empathizes with those guys out there.
With a persona.
Exactly, those people they are building the product for. And the second thing is right in the beginning, in the course of that process, you try to figure out a vision of your product, meaning this is how the solution we want to build should look like in the end. And even if you are approaching the product incrementally, so you first put out a version 1.0 and then go for 1.5 and 2.0, you still know where you want to go to. And even though we are really in favor of getting constant feedback and readjusting that vision, it helps you, it guides you through what you should do next, instead of just blindly doing some improvements without really knowing where you want to go to.
I like this one example very much that I think either you or Michael brought up some time ago with the print button. in your
Yes,
in your app?
and that's really something that that happened in SAP some years ago now. But there was a customer requirement for a print button in a certain application to print out a long list of, I don't know, inventory or whatever. Knowing no further details, we still said, hey, that's an important customer, let's give them their print button. And by accident, a year later, someone went to that company and looked at a different problem, but actually was able to observe how they are using that print button, and that is they daily print out this long list of 40 pages, whatever, hand those prints out over to an intern who then has to type it into an Excel file. Mm-hmm. So that's a very complex and time-consuming process, and we could have just built an export to Excel button, and they would have gained a lot through it. But we didn't really understand what the real need behind their requirement was, and so gave them something they thought they wanted, but that didn't really solve their problem. And really understanding the problems behind what people think is really an important part of what we're trying to do.
So it's really the focus is really putting the end user into your focus, whatever you develop or not develop, or even design, right? So it's about designing your application that actually should be there to solve certain issues.
Yeah, because if you ask the customer for a solution, he can only tell you what you want from his point of knowledge, so he can only suggest solutions that he can imagine. But if you understand his problem, then you can go beyond that and come up with new innovative solutions that really delight him.
So you said you were already working now on this for 2 years. So can you tell your experience about, or what you experienced when working in these design thinking workshops, going through various design thinking exercises for all kinds of different projects? What are your key aha moments that you got, and what you think you would like to share with the people who are just listening? Daniel, before I go.
Okay, so from my point of view, as I mentioned, this has got more to do with mindset than with the process, and this is the most important effect we're recognizing now, and that is that through a better understanding of the people you are working for, and through a better understanding of where you want to go to from a product vision point of view, developers are really empowered to make better use of their talents, because they actually understand why they are doing things, and they are even enabled to question certain backlog decisions or whatever, because they know whom they are working for in the end, and they can ask themselves or their product owners, is that really what Lisa, our persona, would like to have? Or is it just the cheapest way of doing it, but we would make her much more, or would help her much more by doing it a little differently? Mm-hmm. So this whole process of improving the quality of your product, and at the same time, again, the motivation of the developers is much better, because they understand why they are doing stuff, and because they have this goal of I want to help my persona Lisa.
So it's actually alignment within the whole development team, and the not development, the product team with development, with everybody having the same understanding what the end user's needs are.
Yeah, so it basically brings the whole team together around the joint vision. So not only developers, but also product managers, solution managers, the knowledge managers, all the roles involved in defining the product. We include them in the initial workshops. Mm-hmm. We give them a joint vision. And we also, basically what we do with the personas, creating this empathy, we also do that with the team. So they basically learn about each other, outside of their job, because a lot of the teams have hidden talent. So there are developers who basically are photographers or wanted to be something different, and if you know that, you can also draw on that talent and bring them into the process and make people in general more happy and give them more fun doing their work.
Yeah. So what is your experience, so in general, from this whole design thinking methodology at SAP, with all the stuff that you worked on over the past 2 years?
For me, the biggest aha moment is usually if you have skeptics in the design thinking workshops in the beginning, and after 3 days, they usually, it makes click, they get it, and they are most like the most active participants, and they really push the whole thing forward. So that happens a lot of times.
Yeah, just for example, also with me, right? During
yes.
my first design thinking experience, yeah, I was pretty skeptical because I just wanted to start coding because I thought I knew exactly what I wanted to do. But actually, during this InnoJam event, where we do design thinking not in 3 days, but in 7 hours, actually, as part of the InnoJam event series, I also had this click moment, right, when I said, okay, it's really not about thinking around code from the beginning. You should really try to step back and really put the end user into your focus and not the technologies that you know which you think fit best to the user's needs, but really trying to understand the end user, what the end user needs, and actually to really empathize with the end user's perspective, and then really at the end, once you know what you want to build and you are sure that it really solves a problem and not the other way around, you say, okay, I have a technology, I built something, let's see what kind of issue it solves, because that's always the issue when you look into it from a technical point of view. You know technology, you build something with it, and then you try to figure out what you can do with it. And I think that's something that also made me think this is a very interesting methodology to really ensure you build stuff that is useful and is actually good for something.
Yeah, and it's also really a culture change in the organization, so it's always great to come back a couple of weeks later and to see that the teams still use the methods that we showed them. They run around with whiteboards and put up a lot of stuff on the walls to have their artifacts around them and make the stuff more tangible and think more with their hands, really.
Yeah, maybe that's something that I would like to stress as well, that even though we described it that way, that it's something you do to start a project with, to define your product, actually design thinking is kind of a toolbox that you can go back to during every phase of the product development. So there are so many instances where you've already started coding and still wonder, okay, should I do this left or right? Should I do it A or B? And then you can do a very focused design thinking exercise about it, really ideate about that certain problem, validate it with a few family and friends or colleagues, and really also use design thinking in a small way to solve smaller problems. But still, it's very valuable if you can do it along the whole project and start with design thinking and then understanding why you are doing this.
So to wrap it up, it's all about emphasizing with the end user, with design thinking. It's about shifting your mindset, put the end user into the center of all your thoughts when developing a product. If you would like to share one last sentence to people who are listening and watching this, what they should do next in case they want to do more with design thinking, anything you would like to share? One sentence only.
Check out the resources on the blog and try it out yourself. It's hard to learn from a book. Try to get somewhere and experience it.
Yeah, and the mindset thing, step into the shoes of your end users and feel their pain, and this will help you build a better product.
Yeah. So I will put the links that Michael already talked about into the blog. I will attach this video too, and also comments to the podcast. My take for you guys, if you want to find out how it works very quickly, go to an SAP InnoJam, go to www.sapinojam.com to find out where the next InnoJam event is. In case people want to reach out to you, are you available on Twitter?
Yes.
Okay. I will put your Twitter handles also as a comment to the podcast and the video. Thanks a lot for your time and sharing your thoughts about design thinking. Any last minutes, last second questions before we close?
Well, thanks.
Okay, great. That's great. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.